The Chicago Cubs missed their chance on trading Cody Bellinger at the right time. So what do they do now? Yes, welcome on in to First Pitch, your daily MLB recap for all news, notes, and really anything under the sun when it comes with Major League Baseball. I'm your host, Christian Rauh. You can find me on Twitter, X at Christian S. Rauh. And I'm joined here with Troy Brock. You can find Troy on Twitter at Troy B Baseball. And Troy, we got a loaded show today, and it seems like that's happening every single day. First and foremost, I'm glad to be back. I've been off for about a week or so. You and Lindsay have been holding it down. Thank you so much. And you guys were killing it, by the way. You were dropping news. You guys were dropping news live. Even yesterday, we were talking about the Kikuchi news, and that was such an interesting signing, by the way. I will definitely get my 2 cents in at some point about that, because what the Angels are doing is certainly interesting, but we have a lot to talk about on this show today, Troy. We're going to talk about Cody Bellinger, what the Chicago Cubs, what his future is. The Red Sox are making some possible interesting decisions down the line. And then we have an interesting trade rumor that involves your Philadelphia Phillies that we're going to talk about to round out the rest of this show. But Troy, wow, this is going to be a loaded show. You ready? Let's
I'm
rock
ready. Let's go. Welcome back, sir.
All right. Yeah. What a perfect time to come back with some loaded news. It's the end of November, but baseball news has not slowed down. I don't think it's going to slow down before we get to the winter meetings. And once that happens in the first month of or first week of December, it's going to just keep on rolling. So I don't think there's going to be time to breathe, folks. I think there's going to be plenty of time for us to have baseball news all the time. And that's why we are going to continue to give you news every single day, at least 5 days a week here at First Pitch. We might even bring it to you on Thanksgiving Day. We'll see what happens. If the news is rolling in, then we're going to play that one by ear. But other than that, we are going to be here every single day for the foreseeable future. We're not going anywhere here at First Pitch. So be sure to subscribe, hit like, comment. If you're listening on audio, be sure to give us a 5-star review, because we got plenty to give you all off season long. Let's break into this. Cody Bellinger, the Chicago Cubs. There's discussions now after he has opted in to his player contract that now they want to trade him. Now, at this moment now, Troy. They didn't want to do that at the trade deadline last offseason, which I thought would have been the perfect time to do so. But now, after they've finally decided that he has finally decided to opt in, that, okay, maybe we don't want him in our future plans. And those future plans seemed a little skewed, Troy, because Jedd Hoyer at the trade deadline last summer said that they were looking at, quote, 2025 and beyond when asking if he was going to make an aggressive push towards the playoffs last season. Now, obviously, they didn't make the postseason. They missed out just a little bit. They did have a pretty interesting, I don't want to call it run, but they were impressive in the second half of the season. They did make one trade for Isaac Paredes. It was a swap with Christopher Morel. A lot of question marks about Paredes because he doesn't really look good stat-wise in Wrigley Field, I should say. Excuse me, folks. But when you're looking at Cody Bellinger, why didn't they move him at the trade deadline last year if they are now willing to move him now? Before I get rid of and move all of our angles at the same point before letting you speak, Troy, what is your thoughts on this? Cody Bellinger now looking to be possibly traded by the Chicago Cubs.
Yeah, they definitely should have traded him at the trade deadline, because I pulled it up while you were talking. Their record going into the deadline was 51-57. So they were below 500. There were 5 teams ahead of them in the wild card race. They were not.
Did it show how many teams? Did it show how many games behind they were for the wild card spot?
The wild card, they were 6 games back behind the San Diego Padres, who were in third at the time, and they were 11 games back of the Milwaukee Brewers for the Central Division. So it's they definitely should have traded Cody Bellinger at the trade deadline, which they did go on to win, 31 games after the trade deadline. But I mean, who's to say they wouldn't have done that anyway without Cody Bellinger, because he's not the Cody Bellinger that he was in his rookie season anymore. And now, if they don't trade him in the offseason, they've got to pay him a buttload of money because he opted in. And it's just, it's crazy what they're doing up there in Chicago. I don't get it, man.
Yeah, here's my thought process here. The fact that if they felt like he wasn't going to opt in, which it sounded like that's what they were betting on, if they didn't think he was going to opt in the offseason, Why didn't they trade him to get some sort of capital? I'm not sure. Was he eligible for compensation pick? I'm not sure if he was one of those players. If he was, then okay, maybe that's where you're leaning towards. You're leaning for that comp pick portion. But I do still think you could have got more than a potential comp pick from a team that was contending at the deadline. You have to think that there was calls that were coming in for Cody Bellinger. You have to think a guy that can play the corner outfield spot, a guy that can play first base. I mean, you have to think the Houston Astros called, right? Someone who
Oh,
would
absolutely.
at first base and heading into the postseason. You have to think a team like the Houston Astros called. You have to think that the New York Yankees called with the injuries to Anthony Rizzo, with the injuries to, honestly, just the way that the Yankees were playing heading into the postseason. You have to think that those calls were made, and Jedd Hoyer put his hands underneath his butt. Really, I mean, that's really all he did. He sat on his hands and didn't make those moves. It's really questionable to me. And what's questionable to me is this whole 2025 and beyond plan by Jedd Hoyer. He has plenty of prospects, and we keep talking about, will some of those prospects be moved for, more improvement to the current MLB roster? The NL Central, as great as the Milwaukee Brewers look this year, I think we can still say that it's up for grabs because we didn't expect the Brewers to be as good as they were heading into this season.
Nope.
Maybe they overperformed. We don't know what's going to happen to the Brewers in 2025. I think the Cardinals are going to take a huge step back. The Pirates are on the up and up. I think that we can be safe to say that. And the Reds are in a weird turmoil spot right now after making that Jonathan India trade for Brady Singer. I'm not sure what that's going to look like. We'll see. There's some injuries coming back. They still need some outfield help. Their pitching looks really good, but we'll see. But with the Chicago Cubs, they were expected to win the division last year. They did anything but that. They finished in the middle of the division. What is the plan for Jedd Hoyer? Is it to get these prospects up and see what you have? Are they going to take that Orioles approach? But with that being said, why didn't you move Cody Bellinger last year at the trade deadline? What leverage do they have now, Troy?
They don't have much leverage, especially as obvious as they're making it that they want to move Cody Bellinger, because the reports coming out last night were that they were pushing hard at the GM meetings earlier this month of trying to move Cody Bellinger. And as hard as they were pushing, they really don't have much leverage left. And as far as 2025 goes, I mean, if they could trade Bellinger, and they're not going to get a top prospect at this point, but they might can get some kind of middling prospect or a reliever or something. But they need to do something, because the way it looks right now, it's not great for 2025. They have to do something to improve their rotation, which was good in 2024, but it's not really over the top just yet. And they've got to find somebody that can eat the innings that Kyle Hendricks pitched. Even though he wasn't good, he still ate a lot of innings. He had 116 roughly innings, I think, as a starter. And so they have to find somebody that can do that this year. And as it stands right now, they really don't have anyone that can do that on their roster.
Yeah, Hendricks moving over to the Angels, one of the first free agent signings so far this season. You have Justin Steele, who had some injuries, but should have a nice bounce back season. He had some great outings in the second half. Imanaga was absolutely fantastic. There's a lot of good things for this rotation, but if you added one more piece, that would be great. And if you can get it in a trade, that's even better, because you have those moves. You have that type of capital to do so for the Chicago Cubs. Not many teams can say that you have a surplus of prospects. There are more prospects for the Chicago Cubs that they know what to do with. There are going to be too many of those top 100 or fringe top 100 prospects that are on the Cubs right now that are going to have a hard time finding a spot on this current major league roster, even as it sits right now, even as it's constructed. And they're going to want to make some moves to better that MLB roster as it sits right now. Not all prospects are going to be a winner. Not all of them are hits, Troy. So we don't know what's going to happen. The Orioles found that out, right? The Orioles found out about that pretty quick, and they moved down to Miami. We're noticing that some of them are starting to actually be pretty good that moved to Miami, but regardless, I digress on that one. Cody Bellinger should have been traded at the trade deadline last year. I'm going to stick with that. I'm going to probably go to my grave with that one because it's just how it seems to be. They don't have any leverage, but who can they go to now? I think they can go to exactly who they could have went to at the trade deadline and still get something. I think they're going to have to eat some cash this time around, but I do think that there's still a possibility for them to land with a certain squad. The Houston Astros still make a lot of sense in my mind, but the New York Yankees make the most sense, Troy.
Yeah, absolutely. And he would, his batting profile would just play fantastically in that ballpark. Just the way that he pulls the ball he fits perfectly with the New York Yankees, and they need a guy that can play first base, or if they don't sign Juan Soto, that can play center field. And Cody Bellinger is that guy. While he's not really the world beater at the plate that everybody thought that he was going to be early on in his career, he's still a solid defender, and that is what the Yankees need. And like I said, his bat does fit that stadium. So I'm with you right there that he fits perfectly with the Yankees.
We've gone a couple times on this show already. I know you and I have said it. Lindsay and I have said it. You and Lindsay have said it. I think we kind of all have the same take that you cannot build a franchise around Juan Soto if you have to sign him to such a huge contract. The second option of a team that's out in the Juan Soto sweepstakes that do not win that sweepstakes, if they sign 2 or 3 players for that amount, or even, remotely less than that amount, might actually come out the winner when it's all said and done. The Yankees have a chance to do that if they do not sign Juan Soto. Cody Bellinger could be a strong piece of that if they make a trade for that moving forward. We'll see what happens, but regardless, it does look like Cody Bellinger is going to get moved. This kind of screams like a winter meeting move, so I wouldn't be surprised if in the next 2 weeks we see Cody Bellinger have a new team. Might be still in pinstripes, but just be in some Bronx pinstripes like his dad was at one point in time. There's a rippling effect coming from the AL East, and we're not talking about the Yankees this time. We're talking about the Boston Red Sox, and there's a rippling effect that could be happening with their infield, and that starts off with Rafael Devers. There's some news coming in about them potentially moving him to first base. It may not happen right away, but it seems like that's the end goal for him, for Rafael Devers. But if that's the case, what happens to the rest of their roster? We're going to dig into that here on First Pitch. But first, make sure you like and subscribe if you're listening. We do help. It helps out the algorithm a lot. We are growing here. If you see our YouTube page, it is growing. We are getting a lot of new subscribers. Thank you so much for listening. If you're listening on audio, we've seen a huge tick over the last few weeks as well with our free agent coverage. So thank you so much as well for listening. But we are still going. We're looking to get to 1,000 subscribers on YouTube before the end of the year. So be sure to hit subscribe and help us out with that one. But Rafael Devers moving to first base, Troy. I do think that's an interesting decision if they do decide to do that at one point in time. But what the rippling effect could be is that there's a rumor rolling around, and rumors when the stove is hot are fun. I mean, come on. When the stove is hot, I love these rumors. And one of them is happening with the St. Louis Cardinals, a possibility of a trade for Nolan Arenado. Now, we already can see that he looks pretty good in red. He does it with the Cardinals. Moving over to the Boston Red Sox would be an interesting piece if they made a trade for Nolan Arenado. But if that was the case, if you moved Devers to first right away and you brought in Nolan Arenado, who hasn't had the best last few seasons with St. Louis, he was great when he was with Colorado. He started his career with St. Louis pretty good. He got a silver slugger with St. Louis, so we can't say it was always the Colorado effect, right? Is this the right move to get an honestly a declining veteran? Arenado is on the worst half of his career. Let's be honest. I don't think that we're going to get the Nolan Arenado of Colorado back when he goes to Boston. I mean, he might play in Fenway well. That might be a really nice park for him. Who knows? But do you think a trade for Nolan Arenado, does that move the needle for Boston? Does that get them back into being a strong contender in the American League East?
I think it moves the needle a little bit, especially moving Rafael Devers to first base, because defensively, he's just not good at third base. Every single year, I pulled up his Baseball Savant, every single year at third base, except for 2019, he has had a negative outs above average at third base. And surprisingly enough, in 2019, his outs above average was a positive 18. which is absolutely crazy. Very, very much an outlier, but it moves the needle a little bit on as far as the offense goes, and it kind of sounds like they're just trying to load up on offense. Really, they need to be focusing on their pitching. If they want to move the needle at all, they need to be focusing on their starting rotation. Cutter Crawford showed a massive decline in 2024. Nick Pivetta did not accept the qualifying offer, which is insane. He's not going to get as much money as the qualifying offer was because he's not that good. James Paxton, who they got at the trade deadline, retired. Who's their pitching staff right now? It's Cutter Crawford and some of the
Bello.
Brian Bello and some of the guys that are supposed to be raking the infield dirt. Like they need to be focusing on their pitching staff more than they need to be focusing on their offense. But I do think that other than that, Devers the first defensively is the right move.
Yeah, and I don't think that they have to go for a top starting pitcher in the market if you can make this trade, or if you do make this trade. I think this is the only trade you go for that it doesn't involve starting pitching. I'm with you that pitching is the big need here. And this goes into the more of the rippling effect. If Arenado is traded to the Boston Red Sox, there's obviously going to be some sort of rippling effect. You're going to have to move some players to St. Louis. You don't have the pitching depth to move to St. Louis, so it's going to have to be someone else. If you're moving Devers to first base, that leaves Tristan Cassis open to be potentially moved. That leaves Yoshida to be possibly moved. You could even make the argument that a guy like Duran could also be moved. Now, I don't think you're going to move Duran for Arenado. Don't get me wrong. I don't think that's happening. I'm not trying to give you a terrible hot take of a trade idea. But those possibility of names could be moved this offseason when they are trying to reconstruct this roster. Devers to first base, I think, is going to be the end goal. I don't know if it happens in 2025, but I think when you're looking at this long contract that Devers has, he's going to be the cornerstone of your franchise for quite some time now. You're going to wind up moving him at some point because the defense doesn't play at third. You're right. Now, if you get Arenado there, whether his bat works good or not in Fenway, you're getting a glove that is superior, regardless of his age. That hasn't changed. And we saw that in St. Louis. We've seen it in Colorado. I don't expect that to change if he went to Boston. Cassis or Yoshida being moved for potential pitching if they weren't traded in the Arenado trade makes a lot of sense to me because, as you mentioned, they don't have a lot of pitching depth. Andrew Bailey has, dare I say, have a polarizing type of effect on pitchers. Because I think that you can say, and I think Red Sox fans might agree or disagree with me. I think could be either both way. I think this is a 50-50 type of answer here, Troy. I think some people love Andrew Bailey and what they're doing. And I think some people absolutely can't stand what Andrew Bailey is doing with this pitching staff. I think there are people who think that he's improving what he has right now, which isn't 4 aces in the deck. And I also think that they can't stand what he's doing, thinking that they're ruining some of the prospects of what they have in Boston. I think bringing in a couple pieces from the outside to work with Andrew Bailey will definitely show what he is capable of. And it'll make that decision if they need to move on with Andrew Bailey after 2025 an easier one for the Boston front office. So I'm really excited to see who they bring in because they have to bring in some pitching, whether it's a trade, whether it's free agency. It doesn't have to be a Blake Snell. It doesn't have to be a Corbin Burns. It can be the second or third tier pitching in the free agent market. It can be a guy in the trade market. It can happen that way because I don't think that they need a top guy. They just need guys that can eat innings, guys that can be able to pitch, 5-6 to get to that bullpen. But I'm really excited to see what Andrew Bailey can do with whoever they decide to grab.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's like you said, it's very polarizing. Lindsay and I talked about it yesterday when the Yusei Kikuchi signing happened, that there are 3 teams in baseball that you look at whenever pitchers sign somewhere and you're like, they're gonna figure things out. And it's the Houston Astros, the Atlanta Braves, and the Tampa Bay Rays. Pitchers go to those clubs to figure out how to be better pitchers. What you didn't hear is the Boston Red Sox in that list, because if you look at it, even before Andrew Bailey, Chris Sale went to the Boston Red Sox. He had one good year there, and then a bunch of years of injury and not performing to the level that he's capable of. And then the first year he leaves Boston, he's a Cy Young winner in the National League and a Triple Crown winner. So Yeah, it's Andrew Bailey's definitely polarizing, and yeah, I agree. They need to bring in some outside pitching. It doesn't have to be top tier. It doesn't have to be the Corbin Burns or the Blake Snell, like you said. As we saw with the Dodgers, if you can outscore all of your opponents, you don't have to have top tier pitching. And while the Dodgers do have top tier pitching, it's generally on the injured list. So they don't have to have the top tier guys. They can bring in a guy. I think Seth Lugo's a free agent right now. They can bring in Seth Lugo. He can eat a bunch of innings, and he's not going to be as good as he was in Kansas City this year. And he can eat innings, and he can give you a 3.5 to 4 ERA and be a solid addition to their rotation. And with the offense that they have and any potential additions that they might make, including Arenado, that would be perfectly fine as a bridge to get to the bullpen and finish out games.
When you look at the projected rotation right now for the Boston Red Sox, Tanner Hoek, Ryan Bayo, Cutter Crawford, Richard Fitz, Cooper Criswell, according to Fangraphs. That's what they're looking at right now, a plethora of righties. I think you got to find a way to better 4 and 5. I think if you had the top three of Tanner, of Bello, of Crawford, I think you're okay there. And I think even if those stay your 1, 2, 3, I think you're okay there. I don't think you need an ace in free agency, but you do need to improve from Fitz. You do need to improve from Criswell. Those guys need to be more of a fringe. Will they make the opening day roster? Not are they going to be guaranteed heading into 2025 because there's just nobody else to take that spot. So I think that definitely is something moving forward. Obviously, Lucas Giolito, he opted into his at some point. He's going to be back from his Tommy John. Garrett Whitlock is still up there. He's injured right now. We'll see when he returns, but that's still not enough. You still need to get something moving forward. And I think 2 arms is how you replace that in free agency. Again, doesn't have to be top-notch pitching, because I do think Andrew Bailey can do something. I'm on the more of the optimistic side of Andrew Bailey, but I think 2025 will say a lot, especially with those new free agents in that case, because if Andrew Bailey is not able to fix that, I think we need a new pitching coach in Boston heading into 2026 and beyond. There's just a lot to talk about on this show here, and we are already about more than halfway through. We got one more final segment, but before we get to that final one, please, again, make sure you like and subscribe. We have lots of things coming your way here at First Pitch. Again, we're trying to reach to 1,000 subscribers by the end of the year, so be sure to click that subscribe button. Troy, there is a interesting rumor coming around involving your Philadelphia Phillies. The Chicago White Sox are looking to move pitcher Garrett Crochet, and now there's the rumor coming out that potentially the Philadelphia Phillies could be in the mix, and it involves 2 infielders, one of them being a very top prospect in your system, and it involves moving Alec Boehm, who appears to be on his way out regardless at some point this season, and Justin Crawford, a interesting prospect for the Philadelphia Phillies. When we talked about this, I think you sent it in our Discord chat this last night talking about this, and I knew we had to talk about this on the show. You were not interested in this whatsoever, and because you were not interested in it, it involved because you did not want to move Justin Crawford. Take me through your thought process as soon as you saw this trade idea.
Yeah, so a big part of it is not wanting to move Justin Crawford. He's one of the better bat to ball prospects that we have in the organization, that the Phillies have in the organization. One of the best bat to ball players, period, that the Phillies have in the organization. He's a gap to gap guy. He's an outfielder, which the Phillies need. He's got a lot of speed, which the Phillies need. And it's Justin Crawford could make a big impact on the major league roster in 2025. But a big reason I don't want to move Justin Crawford for Garrett Crochet is why do the Phillies need to have another starting pitcher? They have Zach Wheeler, they have Aaron Nola, they have Christopher Sanchez, they have Ranger Suarez. You can throw anyone but Taijuan Walker in the 5th spot and be fine. You saw that with Spencer Turnbull until they ruined him by putting him back in the bullpen. And you saw that with Tyler Phillips until they ruined him by letting him throw the complete game and throwing 120 some odd pitches, whatever it was. And it just completely derailed his entire season. And it's It doesn't make a lick of sense. The Phillies do not need pitching. Yes, Alec Bohm may need to be on the move. He may be a change of scenery candidate, and it may work perfectly for him. I have no problem with the Phillies moving Alec Bohm, but Garrett Crochet is not the guy that they need to move Alec Bohm for, and any of their prospects, especially Justin Crawford and Aiden Miller, doesn't need to be moved for anyone, and neither does Andrew Painter. And I am with you. When we had that discussion last night in the Discord, your response to me saying I am completely out was pennants fly forever. And I am completely with you. I know that Lindsay is a big prospect guy, and he's probably going to look at me differently when he hears this, but I don't care about prospects all that much. I am right there with you. Pennants fly forever. Parades are cooler than prospects. I could not care less about prospects, except for guys like Andrew Painter, Aiden Miller, Justin Crawford, who can be just perennial award candidates year in and year out. Like, those are the kind of guys that you don't trade, especially for a guy like Garrett Crochet. He doesn't have the right mindset. Like, I understand, and I know that I am talking about this a lot, but this is really important. I understand that baseball players want to secure their money. I don't have a problem with baseball players getting paid exorbitant amount of monies. I have no problem with the contract Shohei Ohtani signed. I'm going to have no problem with the contract that Juan Soto signs. What I do have a problem with is the fact that Garrett Crochet said, nah, I'm not going to play unless you pay me. And for me, that is very much akin to Anthony Rendon. We play too long. We play too many games. 162 games is much too long. That is very much akin to an NFL or an NBA player saying, nah, I'm sitting out. I ain't going to play. That's not the baseball way. That's not a guy that you want in your clubhouse, because that's just not a good mindset to have in baseball. You want a guy that is going to play all 162 games. It is a grind. 162 games is a long season. I have no problem with the length of it, but it is a long season. It's a grind. You want a guy that's going to want to play all 162 games, or in a pitcher's case, who's going to start 30 to 33 games a year. I don't like Garrett Crochet. Continue.
This is what happens, folks, when you stay for the third segment of this show. If you needed coffee or needed energy drinks, don't worry. You just need to listen to Troy's rant, and you're just fine. I mean, I'm ready to run through a wall now, and I am nowhere near a Phillies fan, Troy. But, I mean, you make a lot of really good points. I mean, where does the Phillies need to move an infield and a top prospect for a middle of a rotation guy? Because he's – in any other case, he's an ace, but with the Phillies, he's a middle of the rotation guy because of how great your rotation already is. Now, it would be the best rotation in baseball. Let's be honest. It would be easily the best rotation in baseball. I think you already have an argument that the Phillies already have one of the best rotations in baseball. Adding in Garrett Crochet, that does, I think, move the needle in that case. But where do you draw the line on prospects, period? Right? Are you willing to move some of these prospects at all? Whether it's not starting pitching, whether it's some other improvements, if it means that you can get a step closer to the World Series. And the reason I say that is because the Phillies have been so dang close over the last couple seasons. Dave Dombrowski tried to make a big splash this last trade deadline. A lot of them fell through. A lot of those trade deadline things did not work. Estevez didn't work out. Austin Hayes didn't work out. Hayes is now a free agent, right? So there's a lot of really big question marks. And I don't want to say there's question marks to Dave Dombrowski, because he has been certainly aggressive over his tenure with Philadelphia. So I don't think that the questions are necessarily towards Dombrowski, but I do still think that he needs to make a big splash after that crappy trade deadline this past summer to get them back to where they need to be, to get them as a potential World Series contender yet again for 2025 and moving forward. Am I wrong for thinking that the Philadelphia front office has to make a big splash, whether it's in free agency or making a trade like this Crochet move before we hit spring training?
No, not at all. I don't think you're wrong at all. The Philadelphia Phillies definitely have to make a splash. I think that it should come in free agency. Yes, they're probably going to move Alec Bohm, but I think that the big splash should come in free agency. As we've seen, they're probably out on Juan Soto, but there are other guys on the market that they could go after, like and Alex Bregman. Should they trade Alec Boehm or Willie Adames, who they've been linked to? They've been linked to both of those guys over the past few days. Should they trade Alec Boehm? And Willie Adames has made it clear he's okay with moving to third base, and he'd be an improvement over Alec Boehm. But it was definitely a bad trade deadline. And as far as where you draw the line, I think anything after Justin Crawford, who is the Phillies' third best prospect, I think anything after Justin Crawford, you can say sayonara to in a trade for anyone not named Garrett Crochet, literally, that would improve the major league roster, because there are areas that need improvement, but pitching is really not one of those when you can focus on other areas of the roster that do need improvement, like the corner outfield, or like third base, or like shortstop, where you're not getting the production that you wanted from a guy that you paid a buttload of money to, because he's not as good offensively as he once was, and he was never good defensively. And it's just, there are other areas that need improvement, and the Phillies 100%, in order to get over that hump and get to that next level of postseason play, they need to make a big splash in this offseason before Bryce Harper is 100 years old.
That's true. If you're a Philadelphia Phillies fan, I want to know in the comment description below, specifically Justin Crawford, Aiden Miller, Andrew Painter, what would it take for you to move those type of prospects? Troy thinks that you shouldn't move them regardless. So I want to hear your thought process on that one. Final thing before we go, we talked about this Alec Boehm thing, and I think we're going to continue to talk about it a lot because it's such an interesting trade. I mean, we're talking about a guy that's an all-star, looking to be he's kind of getting alienated from his spot, right? I think that's kind of fair to say. But if they do move on from the Phillies infielder here, you have Edmundo Sosa. I don't think he's the answer here, but that's somebody who's sitting on your roster right now. I don't think you want to make him your stopgap. He's great coming off the bench, don't get me wrong. But does that open the door like a guy like Alex Bregman? Does that bring him into the potential mix in free agency?
Yeah, absolutely. They've been linked to him over the past few days, and he would be a good fit. I think that he needs to go back to his ways of hitting gap to gap. I think he kind of has the same problem that Alec Boehm does. He gets into the mindset sometimes where he has to hit home runs, and he's really just not that guy outside of 2019 when the rabbit ball was in play. He's a gap to gap guy who plays really good defense at third base. As we saw, he won a Gold Glove this year, and he would be a good replacement, albeit a pretty expensive one, over Alec Boehm to man the hot corner in Philadelphia.
Let's get out of here. But before, I'm going to ask you a quick question, quick little hot take, if you will. This will be our quick pitch for today. Will this trade get done? Will Garrett Crochet be a Philadelphia Philly when it's all said and done?
No, I don't think it's going to get done. I think somebody else is going to come in with a bigger offer than the Phillies have.
Okay. And if Alec Boehm does get moved, who is going to be your starting third baseman for the Philadelphia Phillies in 2025?
It'll be Alex Bregman.
Ooh, all right. There you go, folks. We got plenty of stuff coming your way on First Pitch all week, so be sure to check it out. If you missed yesterday's episode where Troy and Lindsay broke the news of Kikuchi getting signed by the Los Angeles Angels live on the stream, it happened while they were recording. It was a really fun episode. Be sure to check that out. You can find that on our channel over on YouTube, or just scroll up on your audio feed to the actual episode. We're getting really close to episode 100, so be sure to join us as we hit our first milestone on this show. We have plenty more to come. 100 episodes in, and we're going to have thousands for you here on First Pitch. So be sure to make sure you hit like, hit subscribe, leave some comments, join the conversation. And if you're looking to join the conversation even more, if you're on YouTube, go ahead and scan that QR code at the bottom and join our baseball Discord. We're always talking baseball, fantasy baseball, just hot takes, prospects, anything you name it. We're in there talking baseball. We live and breathe this stuff, guys. So be sure to check it out. But until next time, we'll see you back here tomorrow for another episode of First Pitch.